The bell above the door of the daily grind chimed with a soft, familiar tinkle, a sound that usually felt like a welcome. Today, it sounded like a judge's gavel. I forced a smile for Mrs. Gable, my regular 3:55 p.m. latte order, but my heart wasn't in it. My entire being was focused on the empty chair at my usual corner table, the one by the window overlooking Maple Street. It was a chair that had remained empty for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. I was Chloe, a woman perpetually braced for impact. My life had settled into a careful, quiet rhythm since Liam left. He hadn't just left our shared apartment, he'd left the state, chasing a tech startup dream that he claimed needed the silicon-soaked air of California to breathe. We'd called it a break, that cowardly, nebulous term that gives just enough hope to make the agony last. The first year was a blur of tears and tear-soaked pints of ice cream. The second was a grim determination to rebuild. Now, in the third, I had achieved a fragile, if lonely, peace. I had my job as a graphic designer, my tiny but cozy apartment filled with plants I managed not to kill, and my ritual: every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd come to the daily grind after work, claim my corner table, and sketch. It was my therapy, my meditation, my anchor. I drew the people, the harried students, the elderly couples who barely spoke but communicated in 1,000 tiny gestures, the first dates buzzing with nervous energy. Today, my sketchpad was open, but my charcoal pencil was still. I was waiting for a different kind of date. A blind date. My best friend, Sarah, had finally worn me down. "You're 28, Chloe. You can't become the crazy cat lady who only communicates with her ficus," she pleaded. "His name is Mark. He's a teacher. He's nice, stable, and he has all his own hair. Just one coffee." For me, I'd reluctantly agreed, feeling like a traitor to my own grief. Agreeing felt like I was officially sealing the door on the past, on Liam. And a part of me, a stupid, stubborn, hopeful part, wasn't ready to do that. I checked my phone. 4:02 p.m. Mark was 2 minutes late. My anxiety, a familiar serpent, coiled in my stomach. What if he was boring? What if he was creepy? What if he was perfect, and I was too broken to appreciate it? The bell chimed again. My head snapped up, my practiced, polite smile already stretching my lips. But it wasn't a stranger looking around uncertainly. It was Liam. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. The ambient noise of the coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low hum of conversation, the gentle indie music from the speakers, faded into a dull, distant roar. There he was, standing just inside the doorway, his frame silhouetted by the late afternoon sun. He looked older. The boyish softness in his cheeks had been carved away by time and stress, leaving sharper angles. He wore a dark jacket I didn't recognize, and his hair was a little shorter, but his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were exactly the same. They were scanning the room, and then they landed on me. Time folded in on itself. For a dizzying second, it was 3 years ago. We were here, in this same shop, him stealing a sip of my too sweet caramel macchiato, me laughing at a stupid joke, our legs tangled together under the small table. His expression was a turbulent mix of shock, recognition, and a deep, profound uncertainty. He hadn't known I would be here. This wasn't a planned meeting. He was just back. He started walking towards me, each step slow and deliberate, as if wading through a current. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. "Chloe," he said, his voice lower than I remembered, rougher around the edges. It was a sound that had haunted my dreams and my nightmares. "Liam." My own voice was a whisper, a ghost of itself. What are you doing here?" "I just got back into town yesterday," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. He gestured vaguely towards the street. "I was just walking, clearing my head, and, I guess old habits die hard. This place was always our spot. Our spot." The words hung between us, heavy with memory. He looked at the empty chair opposite me. "Are you expecting someone?" In the seismic shock of his appearance, I had completely forgotten about Mark. The realization hit me like a bucket of cold water. Yes. Actually, a friend." Liam's face fell, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker of pain so swift I might have imagined it. He nodded, taking a step back. "Right, of course. I'm sorry to intrude. It's really good to see you, Chloe." He began to turn, and a panic, raw and primal, seized me. The thought of him walking out of that door, back into the void, was suddenly more terrifying than his unexpected arrival. "Wait, The word was out of my mouth before I could stop it. He stopped, looking back at me, a question in his eyes. You can stay for a minute. My friend is running late. It was a lie, a terrible, transparent lie, but it was all I had. He hesitated, then nodded, sliding into the chair that had been meant for Mark. It was surreal, watching him occupy that space again. He fit it too perfectly, as if the chair had been molded to his shape. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, 1,000 unsaid words screaming in the silence between us. The last time we'd sat here, we'd been fighting. It was a quiet, desperate fight, the kind that isn't about loud words but about the chasm opening up between two people. You look good, Chloe, he finally said, his voice soft. So do you, I managed. California, it agreed with you. A shadow crossed his face. Not really. He let out a long, weary breath, running a hand through his hair. The startup, it collapsed. 6 months ago. We ran out of funding, out of luck, out of everything. I was stunned. All this time, I'd pictured him living the dream, surrounded by palm trees and success. Liam, I'm so sorry. He shrugged, a gesture that was meant to be casual but was filled with a profound defeat. It was a long shot. I guess I knew that. I had to try, you know. I did know. That was the worst part. I had understood his ambition, even as it tore us apart. So you're back for good? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I think so. My mom's not doing great, and there wasn't anything left for me out there. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me, his gaze intense. I thought about you every day, Chloe. The statement was so direct, so unvarnished, it stole my breath. The serpent of anxiety in my stomach was now a swirling vortex of conflicting emotions, anger, longing, confusion, and a treacherous, blooming hope. You didn't call, I whispered, the old hurt rising to the surface, sharp and fresh. For the first few months, you did. Then, nothing. It was like you fell off the edge of the world. I know, he said, his voice thick with regret. And I have no excuse that will ever be good enough. At first, it was because I was busy, working 18-hour days. And then, when things started to go bad, I was ashamed. I couldn't call you and tell you I was failing. I couldn't bear the thought of you saying, I told you so, even though you never would have. I wouldn't have, I said, my throat tight. I know. That's what made it worse. I'd made this huge, life-altering choice, this gamble that cost me, us. And I was losing. Picking up the phone to hear your voice felt like admitting that I'd thrown away the best thing I ever had for a fantasy. So I just stopped. It was the coward's way out. I see that now. His honesty was disarming. For 3 years, I had constructed a narrative in my head where he was a villain, carefree and forgetful of me. This was more complicated. This was human failure, and it was so much harder to hate. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. A text from Sarah. Hey, Mark just texted. He got stuck in a parent-teacher conference and is running about 15 minutes late. Sorry. How's it going? Is he there? I glanced at the message, then at Liam, who was watching me with a quiet, pained patience. He thought I was waiting for a date. A real date. A crazy, impulsive idea began to form in my mind. It was unfair to Mark. It was dishonest. But the universe, or fate, or just dumb luck, had thrown Liam back into my path at the exact moment I was trying to move on. I couldn't ignore it. I picked up my phone and typed a quick reply to Sarah. Change of plans. Don't worry about it. I'll explain later. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. Everything okay? Liam asked. Fine, I said, putting my phone away. My friend can't make it after all. The relief that washed over his face was so palpable it was almost a physical force in the small space between us. He didn't say anything, just let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. So, I said, grasping for a neutral topic. What are you going to do now that you're back? We fell into a stilted, careful conversation. We talked about his mom, about my job, about mutual friends we'd lost touch with. It was like dancing on a floor littered with broken glass. Every step had to be measured, every topic carefully chosen to avoid the deep, bleeding wounds of our past. After about 20 minutes, the awkwardness began to recede, replaced by a faint, familiar warmth. We'd always been able to talk, once. That connection, though battered and bruised, wasn't completely dead. It was a flickering ember in a pile of ash. I should probably go, Liam said eventually, though he made no move to stand. I've taken up enough of your evening. You haven't, I said quickly. Too quickly. He gave me a small, tentative smile. The first one I'd seen since he walked in. It transformed his face, bringing back the ghost of the man I'd fallen in love with. Would it be okay if I walked you home? For old time's sake, every rational cell in my brain screamed no. This was a path lined with emotional landmines. But my heart, my stupid, hopeful heart, overruled them all. I'd like that, I said. We left the daily grind, the bell chiming a farewell behind us. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. We fell into step beside each other, our shoulders almost, but not quite, touching. We walked in silence for a block, the only sound the crunch of our feet on the dry leaves. Remember when we first moved in together? He said softly, breaking the quiet. And we bought that terrible, lumpy sofa from the thrift store because it was all we could afford. A laugh escaped me, unexpected and genuine. Oh my God, yes. We spent a whole weekend trying to restuff the cushions ourselves. There was fluff everywhere. We looked like we'd been in a snowstorm. It was the most uncomfortable couch in the history of furniture, he said, grinning. But I loved it. I loved every minute of that messy, imperfect life with you. The laughter died on my lips. The past tense hung in the air between us. Why are you saying these things, Liam? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why now? He stopped walking and turned to face me, right there on the sidewalk under the glow of an old-fashioned street lamp. His expression was earnest, etched with a sincerity I couldn't doubt. Because I was an idiot, he said, his voice low and intense. Because I thought, making it, meant $1 billion valuation in a corner office. But failing, losing everything, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It stripped away all the noise. It showed me what was real. And what was real, Chloe, was you. It was always you. I didn't come back for you, because I didn't think I had the right. But seeing you today, sitting in our spot, it felt like a sign. It felt like a second chance I know I don't deserve. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his face. For 3 years, I had dreamed of hearing these words. I had written this scene in my head 100 times. But now that it was happening, it was terrifying. You broke my heart, Liam, I said, the words trembling. You didn't just leave. You made me feel like I wasn't enough to stay for. You were always enough, he said, his own eyes glistening. I was the one who wasn't enough. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't secure enough. I needed to go out and fall on my face to realize that the treasure wasn't at the end of some rainbow. It was the home I'd left behind. He reached out, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. His fingers gently brushed a stray tear from my cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of memory and feeling that went straight to my soul. I'm not asking you to forget the past 3 years, he whispered. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of your future. However you'll have me, even if it's just as a friend who buys you coffee sometimes. I looked at him, at this man who was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world. I saw the pain of his failure in the new lines around his eyes. I saw the boy I'd loved in the curve of his smile. And I saw a man who had been humbled by life, who had come back with a quieter, more genuine understanding of what mattered. The anger and the hurt were still there, a scar that would always be a part of me. But in that moment, standing under the soft light on a quiet street, the hope was stronger. I didn't expect you to show up today, I said, my voice finally steady. I was so angry when I saw you. And scared. I know, he said, his hand still cupping my cheek. But, I took a deep, shuddering breath, the words feeling both terrifying and right. I'm glad you did. The smile that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. It was full of relief, of joy, of a love that had been weathered but not broken. He didn't kiss me. He just wrapped his arms around me in a tight, fierce hug, pulling me against his chest. I buried my face in his jacket, breathing in the scent of him, different, but with the same essential, comforting note underneath. I felt the solid, real weight of him, the steady beat of his heart against my ear. It felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. We stood like that for a long time, two souls finding their way back to each other in the twilight. The past was a complicated country we would have to navigate, filled with pain and regret. The future was uncertain and scary. But in that single, perfect moment, holding on to each other on a quiet street, none of that mattered. He had shown up, against all odds. And for the first time in 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, my world felt whole again. The careful, quiet rhythm of my life had been disrupted, but in its place was the beginning of a new, more hopeful song.